I'd really like to have a nice, mellow conversation with you guys. Those of you who know me, i.e. the back of the audience, people who have to be here right now because otherwise it'd be class. You know my style, and I appreciate that we'll have a nice, relaxing time. So, who am I? I'm Dan Martin. Thank you, Margarita, for that picture. It took only 750 pictures to get an appropriate picture for me, but that's okay. Where am I coming from? I'm a social and industrial organizational psychologist by training, and I've spent probably the last 10 years looking at really disturbing phenomena, specifically prejudice, discrimination, usually in the workplace. So in all likelihood, if you come to see me on a Saturday when I'm doing my research, you'll see me looking at discrimination in terms of things like selection procedures and practices, things like compensation discrimination, anything that's going to negatively impact people's ability to move through various socioeconomic stratas. So, having said that, you can imagine that over time one gets burdened by looking at this stuff after a while. It gets pretty disappointing and depressing. So I've been so happy to have positive psychology kind of reignite many of the things that we can look at now using some of the various technologies that have been shown to us today. So, a couple things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about framing, and I'm going to tell you two stories about framing. One is really kind of disturbing, and the other one involves two very personal facts about me. Are you ready for those personal facts? Can you put them in your head? Not even my students know this. I have a really large scar on my side. It goes from one side of me to the other side, and my father was born with one arm. Okay, so I'll get back to that in a half a second. So the first aspect of framing that I'd like to talk about is when we frame our environment, we're thinking about the things that we witness on a day-to-day basis, whether they're positive or negative. And I don't know about you guys, what do you do in the morning? You wake up, you turn on the television, or you go to Google News, or you go to SFG, or one of your various types of media outlets, and you read the news. And what happens to you? You become slightly depressed. You recognize that horrible things are happening everywhere around you, all across the world, including in your own neck of the woods. If you don't, you may be slightly sociopathic. Just kidding. The point I'm trying to make here is that we frame our environment on a daily basis by virtue of what we pay close attention to. Would you agree? I think so. So, let's go back to the other type of framing. For a long time, we've been trained to think that people with disabilities are victims in many ways. My father was born with one arm. He's a very successful guy. He actually raced cars, I think, partially because it was a challenge to him. But let's take you back many, 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 many years to when I was a young man. Not my August age of 25 right now, but when I was a little bit younger. When I was in 3rd grade, I was very crazy. And I would do crazy things. So one day I was in Miss Bender's class, fellow Miss Bender, and I did what all 3rd grade boys do. They rip off their shirts and they run around screaming. And this was a lot of fun. I had a great time. And she sat me down. She said, "Dan, what are you doing? Put your shirt back on and sit down." And then later on in the class, she came up to me and she said, "Dan, how did you get that scar on your side?" And give away my age. This was around the time Jaws, remember the movie? Had come out. And I said to her with a very straight face, I said, "I was attacked by a shark. My dad and I were swimming out in the ocean, and the shark came and it grabbed me." She said, "Why is the scar just a straight line?" I said, "It had an overbite." And she said, "What happened?" And I said, "The shark bit me. My dad reached over and poked the shark in the eye. The shark dropped me, but it bit his arm." She said, "Lies will get you nowhere. You're lucky I don't send you to the principal's office. Be quiet." So, teacher-parent conference day came around. The teacher immediately rushes over to my father. She knows who he is. He doesn't know who she is. She said, "Mr. Martin, I'm so sorry. I thought Dan was a liar." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "The shark attack." I said, "Tell me more." So she told him the whole story, and he looked at her, and he looked at me, and he looked at her, and he said, "It was terrible." He embellished on the story. What I'm trying to make here is this is framing. It's taking someone who might be perceived as a victim and turning them into a hero. And one of the reasons I look at this is because as somebody who works in the organizational behavior field, I'm always looking at things in people's environment that impact their performance in the workplace. So those are my stories about framing. A couple things that we need to know. This is really important to think about in these days and times. So many of our students are exceedingly depressed. So many of our faculty members are depressed. So many members of our community are depressed. We all know someone who lost jobs. We all know people who are being not offered the same kinds of opportunities people just a couple of years previously would have been afforded them, right? I mean, when we think about a situation that's impacted our state and the potential, or I should say, the for sure $500 million that the California state system is going to be losing, we have to be really concerned. This $500 million may be a $1 billion loss. And that's going to have significant impact on everybody in this room, as well as the future of California in terms of education and employment. So it's really interesting. How do we see this on a daily basis as faculty members, as staff members, or as students? People are not happy. My students are not happy. The faculty members are not happy. And what does this mean? We're all set out against each other, and we're always at each other's throats, trying to protect little bits of property that we perceive ourselves to own, whether that's a student, whether that's a faculty member, whether that is actually staff. So what do we know about the kind of macro environment of stress and student climate? I have a background in institutional research, and I do a lot of organizational assessment surveys for the federal government. And it's really important to understand the climate that employees are engaged in, because frankly, it's going to have an impact on your performance. When we look at student climate and how students are feeling, we need to think about the fact that a negative climate, as measured by something that's done quite often, which are student climate surveys, is going to impact whether or not students are going to make it through school, whether or not they actually bond with their specific college, and whether or not they're going to have positive academic outcomes. Okay? When we look at healthy students, I knew I would gesticulate way too much. It happens with me all the time, so you're going to have to bear with me. As we understand student climate, positive student climate leads to positive outcomes both academically, but also in terms of occupational outcomes in the future. It also links students to their institution, and it makes it a lot easier for faculty members to bear with all those smiling faces out there. Okay, so bear with me. I had a conversation with a student who's actually in this room. His name is Nikon Oshilari. And Nikon's actually going to be presenting to you later. And he was telling me about some software that's out there. You know, this is literally the intersection between software and behavioral and social sciences. So what we started talking about was the fact that there's software out there that maps human behavior. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of ushahidi. It means witness in Swahili. The interesting thing about ushahidi is it's been used for a wide range of events. I think it started in Kenya, monitoring political violence. It's been used to monitor radiation levels in Japan. It's also been used to monitor the fires that were surrounding Moscow just a couple of years ago. And anybody essentially can go anywhere and find a map of crime in any US city. I encourage you guys to type in ushahidi crime map, and in your city, you'll be able to find the spots to maybe avoid next time. But Nikon actually made this great suggestion. He said, hey, why don't we map compassion? I thought to myself, that is a really cool idea. But then I started thinking about it, and I thought, what would that look like? And the researcher in me said, you know, it's funny. When we look at compassion, when we look at pro-social behavior, it oftentimes maps really well with things coming from these student climate surveys that are done annually, that are used for purposes of reaccreditation and bringing people into our system. So I started thinking about this. There are two emotions that people have been looking at recently, specifically Jonathan Haidt, a social psychologist, has been looking at this concept called elevation. So, ladies and gentlemen, what happens when you see a positive movie, something that makes you feel really good? Do you feel like opening the door for the people behind you in the movie theater a little bit more often? Do you feel like reaching over and grabbing somebody and giving them a hug? Do you feel like sharing something kind of special that you wouldn't have if you hadn't seen a positive movie? This is elevation. It's witnessing other people, but the interesting part about it is there's this element of behavioral modeling in it as well. People tend to want to actually replicate the things that they're seeing as they witness pro-social behavior. So I started thinking elevation would be good. I started thinking that admiration, when you see an exemplar of something happening, oftentimes people feel compelled to broaden their horizon in that area too. Have you ever seen a fantastic faculty member give a great lecture?
Yes.
Well, notice that it's coming from the front of you. So I'll slip you a 5 in my class later. The point that we're trying to make here is that these things are possible to actually map. So this led to a concept, which would be a fantastic natural experiment. What's the natural experiment? In a nutshell, there's baseline data provided by student climate surveys. These are done not annually, then quite frequently over the course of time. And we can actually use this pro-social mapping, or pro-social behavior mapping, of elevation and admiration, to start to try to impact perceptions of student climate around campuses. It's just taking someone's frames and adjusting a little bit. You guys with me? So, what does this look like? You've got the benchmark, the baseline of the student climate surveys. You've also got wonderful natural control groups. We're part of 23 different universities, right? The Cal State system. We can compare ourselves to another institution that didn't have this wonderful behavioral mapping implemented in it. So here's some of the variables that are actually part and parcel of this. You can see that there's things like courtesy, student tutoring help, sharing resources, good food, always very important, and interpersonal validation. These are things that students experience quite often, and these are literally the variables that are pulled from pages of these student climate surveys. The interesting thing here is that our expectation is that once people witness these elements, that they will actually make a contribution themselves, right? Like that movie that we witnessed, kind of nice. So, a couple things that we need to take a look at. This is the Bay Area. Can you guys see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. You notice that we actually implemented this here at Cal City State. You can see it all the way up there. But people, once they start mapping pro-social behavior, want to do it everywhere. Something good happens. So it's interesting, we've actually started doing this at Stanford as well. Berkeley is coming up as well. Let's dig in a little bit deeper and take a look at Cal State East Bay. Cal State East Bay is covered with pro-social behavior. Now think about this in terms of framing. If you think that it's going to be another horrible, dreadful day at school, you're probably not paying attention to the right things, right? So let's dive in a little bit deeper, and you can see that I've changed the actual variable view, and you can see when you click on one of these dots, what's actually happening. So here, someone made a new friend in the business building. And when you actually go a little bit further in, it tells you what happens. And in this case, a student shared the most intimate thing that one can share in a classroom, their Facebook name. So people are actually sharing and doing nice things. This is an amazing tool just because it enables people to start recognizing and realizing what's happening around them. So a couple things. What are we noticing people are paying closest attention to? Usually it's those things that are easiest to recognize. Suddenly all my students are saying, thank you, when somebody opened the door and holding it for the next person behind them. They're paying attention to when people are sharing. They're paying close attention to a host of other things in their environment that really relate to pro-social behavior, specifically in terms of elevation, as well as admiration. The interesting thing is I've had some very small focus groups with my students, and they've started reporting that they do want to participate in these kinds of behaviors based on just this reframing of their environment. So, this has been something that's been of great interest to a host of other universities, and we're opening up different maps all the time. I was talking to Dan a little bit earlier, and he was saying, wouldn't it be nice, you know, when you watch the news and there's bombings, there's plane crashes, there's murders, wouldn't it be nice if the human interest story would be, hey, let's check the map this morning and see where happiness is actually going on. It's a pleasant way of understanding what might be happening in your environment. So, here's some of the universities that are participating. This is a comment that didn't make it onto the map because it really didn't relate to pro-social behavior, but I thought it was quite amusing. A student said, I saw a cute girl. I smiled. I said hi. She smiled back and said hi. First time ever. So, you know, it's a nice way for people to be able to express themselves. Not really the pro-social behavior we're looking for in this circumstance, but definitely the best comment. Very quickly, the goal of this presentation was to get people to recognize that once you see something, you are actually encoding feelings. And those are feelings that are going to impact what you next want to do. So really, framing is quite important to you on a daily basis. Think about my dad. If you ever want to contact us, don't hesitate to do so.
the Peace Lab here at Cal City State, or you can always contact me directly at Cal City State. Thank you guys very much for being here.